The world did not fall into war suddenly. It walked into it confidently, proudly, and blindly, believing that modern civilization was too advanced, too intelligent, too connected to ever destroy itself. In the summer of 1914, Europe stood at the peak of its power. Empires stretched across continents. Cities glowed with electric lights. Trains moved faster than ever, and science promised a future of endless progress. Kings, generals, and politicians believed that if war ever came, it would be short, glorious, and decisive. Young men believed it would be an adventure. Newspapers celebrated it. Crowds cheered it. No one imagined that this single war would kill millions, collapse empires, redraw the world map, and plant the seeds for an even greater catastrophe. This was the war that was supposed to end all wars. Instead, it began the age of total destruction. To understand World War I, we must go back before the first shot was fired, to a Europe filled with tension beneath its polished surface. For decades, the great powers of the world had been competing for dominance. Industrialization had transformed nations into economic and military giants, but it also created rivalry. Britain ruled the seas. France sought revenge for past humiliations. Germany rose rapidly as an industrial and military powerhouse. Russia expanded east and west, and the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires struggled to hold together their diverse populations. National pride hardened into nationalism, and nationalism turned neighbors into enemies. Alliances formed not for peace, but out of fear. Fear that if war came, standing alone would mean destruction. Militarism gripped Europe like an obsession. Nations measured their strength by the size of their armies and the power of their weapons. Germany built a massive army and challenged Britain's naval supremacy. Britain responded with bigger battleships. France expanded conscription. Russia mobilized millions. War plans were drawn up in minute detail, timetables calculated down to the hour, as if war were a mechanical process rather than human slaughter. The belief was simple and deadly. If war came, speed would decide victory. Whoever mobilized first would win. At the same time, alliances locked countries into rigid commitments. Germany stood beside Austria-Hungary. France aligned with Russia. Britain promised to protect Belgium. These alliances were meant to prevent war, but instead they guaranteed that any conflict would spread. One spark could ignite the entire continent. That spark came from the Balkans, a region known as the powder keg of Europe. The Ottoman Empire had been weakening for years, and new nations had emerged, fueled by nationalism and dreams of independence. Serbia, in particular, wanted to unite Slavic peoples under its leadership, a goal that directly threatened Austria-Hungary, a multi-ethnic empire struggling to maintain control. Tensions simmered, conspiracies grew, and violence became a political tool. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, heir to the imperial throne, traveled to Sarajevo. It was meant to be a routine visit. Instead, it became one of the most consequential days in human history. A group of young nationalist conspirators waited along the route. After a failed bombing attempt earlier in the day, fate intervened. Franz Ferdinand's car took a wrong turn and stopped directly in front of one of the conspirators, Gavrilo Princip. In a moment that would change the world, Princip fired 2 shots, killing the Archduke and his wife Sophie. The assassination shocked Europe, but it did not have to lead to global war. Yet diplomacy failed at every step. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia. Serbia accepted most demands but resisted full submission. Austria declared war. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia, then France. Germany invaded Belgium to reach France quickly. Britain declared war on Germany. Within weeks, nearly every major power was pulled into the conflict. What began as a regional crisis became a world war. At first, many believed the war would be over by Christmas. Soldiers marched off with flowers in their rifles. But optimism died quickly on the battlefields of Europe. Germany's plan to defeat France swiftly failed at the First Battle of the Marne. Both sides dug in, and the war transformed into something no one had prepared for, a brutal stalemate defined by trenches, mud, and death. Trench warfare became the symbol of World War I. From the North Sea to the Swiss border, opposing armies faced each other across narrow strips of land called no man's land. Soldiers lived underground for months, surrounded by rats, lice, disease, and constant fear. Attacks meant climbing out of trenches and charging through machine gun fire. Thousands died to gain a few meters of ground. Artillery bombarded positions day and night, turning landscapes into lifeless wastelands. New weapons made the war more deadly than anything before it. Machine guns cut down entire waves of soldiers in seconds. Poison gas drifted silently across battlefields, burning lungs and blinding eyes. Tanks appeared for the first time, clumsy but terrifying. Airplanes evolved from reconnaissance tools into weapons of war, dogfights filling the skies. Submarines hunted ships beneath the oceans, making civilians targets far from the front lines. Technology had advanced faster than morality, and the result was industrial-scale killing. The war spread beyond Europe. In the east, battles were more fluid, but just as deadly. The Russian army suffered massive losses, poorly supplied and poorly led. The strain of war pushed Russia toward revolution. In 1917, the Russian monarchy collapsed, and a new Bolshevik government seized power, pulling Russia out of the war entirely. The Russian Revolution reshaped global politics and introduced communism as a force that would define the century. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire entered the war, opening new fronts in the Middle East. Fighting spread across deserts and mountains. The Gallipoli campaign became a symbol of tragic failure, costing thousands of lives with little gain. In the Arab world, revolts weakened Ottoman control, reshaping the region in ways that would cause conflict for generations. Across the Atlantic, the United States initially stayed neutral. Americans watched the war with horror, but believed it was a European problem. That changed as German submarines attacked ships, including civilian vessels. Economic ties with the Allies deepened involvement. In 1917, Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare and attempted to provoke Mexico against the United States. It was enough. America entered the war, bringing fresh troops, resources, and industrial power. The arrival of American forces shifted the balance. In 1918, Germany launched a final massive offensive, hoping to win before U.S. strength fully arrived. It failed. Allied forces counterattacked. German lines collapsed. Soldiers were exhausted, hungry, and disillusioned. At home, civilians faced starvation and unrest. The illusion of victory shattered. On November 11, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. The war was over. But the world it left behind was broken. More than 16 million people were dead. Empires had collapsed: German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian. Entire generations were scarred physically and psychologically. Cities lay in ruins. Families were shattered. The map of Europe was redrawn, often carelessly, planting new seeds of conflict. The peace that followed was fragile and deeply flawed. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany harshly, blaming it for the war and imposing crushing reparations. Instead of healing wounds, it created resentment, humiliation, and anger. Many warned that the treaty guaranteed another war. They were right. World War I did not end violence, it transformed it. It showed humanity the full destructive power of modern warfare. It changed politics, borders, societies, and ideologies. It set the stage for World War II and shaped the modern world more than almost any other event in history. This was not just a war of nations, it was a war of systems, beliefs, and ambitions. A war that proved progress without wisdom can destroy civilization itself. And the echoes of World War I still shape our world today. This is why history remembers it not just as a conflict, but as a warning. And this is the kind of history we explore here on Explainary. Stories that don't just tell you what happened, but show you why it still matters.